Hello, class. Today we're going to be studying section 1.7. After today's lesson, we only have one more section before the Unit 1 test. So I hope you're doing pretty well. I miss seeing you every day, and hopefully we'll be back together next week. So section 1.7 deals with linear inequalities. This section should be fairly easy for most of you. You should remember this from your algebra classes. Some things might be a little different when you see the names. So if you notice, this would be considered an open interval, and this one is an open infinite interval. The reason it is infinite is because it is continuing either to the right or to the left. Remember, if it goes to the left, you have your negative infinity on the left. If it goes to the right, you have your positive infinity on the right. So it's closed if both of the circles are closed, but it is a closed infinite if it is continuing in a direction to infinity or negative infinity. So notice that it's just considered closed or open if it is a segment. An open interval means that the circles are open. That signifies that you're going to have parentheses. If the circles are closed, that means that you're going to have a bracket. Now remember, brackets signify the lines underneath because it means equal to. And if it doesn't have a bracket, you don't have a line under it. So this would be the ones that are in between, which are your segments. It's half open if one side is open and one side is closed, or vice versa. Okay, remember, if it's a segment, it's going to be written in between. So it's going to look like these. If it's a segment, you're going to have your variable in the middle. Your inequalities are always going to be pointed to the left if it's in between. And if it's closed, it has the line under it. If it is open, it does not. Okay, so as we go to example 1, we're going to try to consider the segment that's given and name the interval. So if you look at that type of interval, it's half open and half closed. So this would be considered, since we have one end open and one end closed, we're going to call that half open. Now we're going to try to write that with set builder. So we're going to start with our lowest number, which is going to be on the left. You're going to put your letter in the middle. You're going to put your highest number on the right. When it is in between, the arrows are going to point to the left. The part that is closed is going to be underlined. Okay, so with this, with set builder, you'll see they'll put the little set using that variable x. This means such that. And then you close the set. So this reads the set containing all x's such that -6/5 is less than x is less than or equal to 3. So x is between -6/5 and 3, including 3. So since it is half open, this part is going to be open because it doesn't have the line and it has an open circle. And then the 3, since it is closed with the equal to, will be a bracket. So now we're getting to where we're going to solve some inequalities. So remember, we're going to isolate the x. So we're going to add 3 to both sides. And we come up with 2x is less than 8. Then we're going to divide by 2 and get x is less than 4. So to graph that, we're going to draw a number line, and we're going to put the number 4. Now, since there is no line under the 4, it's open. So I'm going to put an open circle, and it's all numbers that are less than 4, which means we would color to the left. So that's going to be an open infinite interval. So this is going to be it says to write it in set builder notation. So we're going to do the set of x's such that x is less than 4. Interval notation, since it's going to the left, it's going to negative infinity. And then 4 would have a parenthesis. Okay. Now we're looking at example 3 where you have variables on both sides. So we're going to try to get the x's on one side together first. So I'm going to add the 4. -9 plus 4 is going to be -5. Then we're going to add the 3. -5x is greater than or equal to 10. Now, we don't flip the symbol when we are adding or subtracting. But recall that when we divide by a negative, or you multiply by a negative, and you're doing that to both sides, the symbol is going to flip. So since I'm dividing by a negative, we're going to have x. That's going to change to less than or equal. Then we'll have -2. Okay, so it wants us to graph. So we're going to put a closed on -2, color to the left. So if we're putting this in interval notation, that means this is going to negative infinity. So from negative infinity, infinity is always open, to -2, that's closed because it's equal. And please put a note or recall that when you divide by a negative, you need to flip your symbol. That also is if you multiply both sides by a negative, you flip your symbol. Now, some of the problems will get a little bit longer, but they're still not too bad, okay? You've got this because this shouldn't be a very difficult section. So the first thing I'm going to do is drop the 2, and then I'm going to distribute. So we would get a -5x plus 10 is less than. Then I'm going to distribute the 4, 12 minus 8x plus 7. Now, after you have distributed, you want to look to the left and see if you can combine anything. So we're going to be able to put together 2 plus 10. So 2 plus 10 is going to go together and give us a 12. On the right side, we're going to be able to add the 12 plus the 7. That's going to go together and give us 19. Now, once you have combined your like terms and you have variables on opposite sides, I'm going to now move the letters to the left. So I'm moving my letters to the left. So that letter on the right will cancel. I did the inverse. So then I have 12 plus 3x is less than 19. Now I'm going to subtract 12 to get the number to the right side. And I get 3x is less than 7. Divide by 3, and x is less than 7/3. Now, when you're dealing with inequalities, you always want your variable on the left. So therefore, it might be easier to just remember to take the letters to the left side and your number to the right. This one is asking for set builder. It's going to take the answer and just kind of dress it up a little bit with the set notation. Then it's asking us also to graph it. So this means that we have an open on 7/3 going to the left. And therefore, for interval, would be negative infinity to 7/3, parentheses on both. Okay, so this is my set builder. This is the graph, and that is your interval. So if you get confused as you're working, go back and refer to this. So remember, this part is our graph because that's our picture. Our interval is going to have the infinities, or it's going to be a segment with parentheses or brackets. And then your set builder is the answer with the little squiggle marks. Okay. So as we go to this, you might want to pause the video and come back and check your answers and go through with me if you feel like you're pretty good at this, okay? Since we're not able to meet in person. So if you recall, we want to get rid of the fraction. So I'm going to multiply everything by a common denominator of 5 and 2. So a number that both of those will go into will be 10. So I'm going to distribute that to the very first part. So as you are distributing that, 5 is going to go into 10 2 times. And then I'm going to multiply that to the top of that fraction right there, which is 1 minus 4w. I have a minus sign now. Okay, 2 goes into 10 5 times. I'll multiply that to the w and get 5w. And then the last one I distribute that to is the one across on the right side. And that is just 10 times negative 5, which is negative 50. So after that, we've got rid of the fraction. We're going to distribute. So that's going to be a negative 8w. Now I'm going to look to the left-hand side, and I see that I have w's on the left-hand side right there. So I'm going to put those together. That's going to be 2 minus 13w. Now I'm going to move the 2 to the other side by subtracting. That's going to give us a negative 52. Then we're going to divide by negative 13. And remember from earlier, when you divide both sides by a negative, we've got to flip the symbol. So that's going to come out to be w is greater than or equal to 4. So set builder, we just kind of dress that up. Graphically, we're going to put a closed on 4 going to the right. Remember that you read these from left to right. So we start at 4 with the ray, and it keeps going to the right to positive infinity. So remember from in the past, if it is going to the right, the infinity is on the right, and it's going to positive numbers. If it is going to the left, the infinity is on the left, and it's going to be negative. Okay, and our last question here was letter B. I'm going to recopy that down here. This time I don't have to distribute, but I do have variables on opposite sides. So I'm going to subtract and bring my letters to the left side. So 3.7 minus 3.45 is going to be 0.25. Then I'm going to add the 6. And then we're going to divide by a 0.25. We're not flipping the symbol because that 25 hundredths is positive. So it's going to stay greater than. So you'll just type in 12.1 divided by 0.25, and you should get 48.4. Okay, so putting that in set builder, I'll put the set. This one would be an open circle on 48.4 going to the right. So we'll have a parentheses this time. The bracket was when it was closed, parentheses for open, and this is going to the right, so the infinity is on the right side. Now we might be getting to something that's a little different. Maybe we haven't saw this before, but it's not going to be too difficult, okay? The main thing is you need to understand these words, and I would write this down for help, okay? So you're going to see some symbols. One of them is going to look like this, an upside down U. And what that means is an intersection. You're looking for what is in common. You're looking for what they share that's the same. So basically, their overlap. The other symbol you're going to see is going to look like a U, and that is the union. That is where you're going to put everything together and list everything. Okay, so the easiest way to tackle this would be to think about what this would look like if you were to write it with inequalities. So if I was to think about this right here, and I had a zero that was closed, going to positive infinity, the graph would look something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and put down what that would look like in inequality notation. So it basically would say x is greater than or equal to 0. So when you see the upside down, which is the intersection, like this one, you're going to put the word and. When you see the U, you're going to put the word or. So the other graph is going to be going to the left on positive 5. So if I look at these two graphs together, and I have 0 here and 5 there, I'm looking at what they have in common. So if I have 0 going to the right and 5 closed going to the left, the part that they have in common is going to be this overlap. That's the part that they're going to share. So the answer would be close 0, close 5, shade in the middle. And then it's going to ask you to put this in interval notation. So this would be a bracket on 0 to 5 bracket. Okay, when you get to letter B and you see the parentheses, that's like your order of operations. So you're going to do that first. So we're first off going to think about what this left side would be, which means we would have a open to the left. So that would be x is less than -2. The symbol here, U, is or. The other graph would be an open to the right. So that would be x is greater than -2. So with or, you're going to graph both of these. So if I have -2 open, and I go to the left, and then the other one, I'll go to the right. So it looks like it's going to be everything but -2. Okay. Now I need to look at that compared to a bracket on -4 to infinity. So this would be from -4 to infinity, a closed to the right, which is greater than or equal to -4. So with and, I have to look for what both of these things have in common. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to regraph and look for what they both share. Okay. So if I look at -2, and that's going in opposite directions, and then I go over here and I graph this one, the -4 would be to the left of -2. It would have a closed circle going to the right. Okay. So we're looking for the overlap of what they have in common. So they would have from this point over, but this one doesn't share -2. And then it would have an overlap from this point, and they both have arrows, which means it continues. So if I'm putting that in interval, this would be a bracket on -4, a parenthesis on -2. And the other part that they have in common is from -2 to positive infinity. So they would have this portion, but not -2, or this portion. So those would be the portions that you would have in common. And the reason we use the union right there in that answer is because the answer comes in two separate pieces. It's not one continuous interval because that -2 was not included in both pieces. So a compound inequality is like a compound sentence. You're going to have two inequalities that are joined together using the words and or. A number is a solution to a compound inequality involving the word and if that number is a solution to both. That's why the overlap. It would have to be in common with both when you're using and. A number is a solution to a compound inequality involving the word or if that number is a solution to just one inequality. So as we go to example 5, we're going to, first off, try to get rid of the fraction here, which is dividing by 3. So I'm going to multiply everything here by 3. So -2 times 3 is going to be -6. This 3 right here is going to cancel out with that 3. So we're going to get less than or equal to 2 minus 4x. And then we have less than 15. So this is a compound inequality because you have two problems. You have one part on each side, okay? When it is in the middle like that, when it's in the middle, it's usually going to be a segment, and it's going to be an and because segments are what they have in common, and that's usually in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to solve for x. So since I have two inequalities, I'm going to have to subtract it from here and both sides because it's in the middle. So that's going to give me a -8. That's going to stay. Symbol stays. Then I have 13. So the symbol is going to stay unless I'm dividing by a negative, which is going to be my next case. I'm going to divide by -4 because I want the letter in the middle. Okay, I'm going for x in the middle. That's going to go into that and give me a 2. We're going to flip the symbol because we're dividing by a negative. So remember, when we're dividing by negatives, we're going to flip. That's going to go to greater than or equal. That's going to cancel to a 1x. This is going to flip as well. That's the other part of the inequality. And that's going to give you -13/4. Now, when you write your answer, you always want your lowest number on the left. So notice right here, my lowest number is on the right, okay? So we want it to be from low, then we want the variable, and then we want the high number, okay? So you want the variable in the middle, whatever letter you're dealing with, and these arrows are going to be pointing to the left. So my low number is negative 13/4. My variable is x, and my high number is 2. So if I read this, x is greater than, so x is greater than, that says x is less than, so I put less than. So when you look at that, the small part is to the x with the 2. And right here with the x, the big part is to the x right here. So if I read that backwards, negative 13/4 is less than x. And you see how it goes in that order. And x is less than or equal to 2. Okay, so now we're ready to graph it. So you want the lowest one, like we said, on the left, the highest on the right. No line is an open circle. That one has a line, which means it's included. And like I mentioned a while ago, this is going to be a segment because it is in the middle. Okay, to put the interval notation, we're going to put an open on negative 13/4 and a bracket on 2. Okay. Now, looking at this one has the word and. So we're going to separate those, and we're going to solve each problem. So I'm going to add my 1. Now, when I divide by a positive 3, I do not flip it. So this would be x is less than negative 2. Subtract 1. Divide by 4. X is greater than 2. Now remember with and, I'm looking for what they share that's the same. So I'm going to go over here and graph both of these. So with the first one, I got a negative 2, and it's going to the left open. This one is a positive 2, and it's going to the right open. There is no overlap, so there is nothing in common. So your answer would be no solution. Nothing would be in common. Or you would have the circle with the slash, which is the empty set. Okay, so as you write this one, you're going to see a compound word or. So we're going to solve each of these first. Subtract 1. Divide by negative 3. That's going to cause me to flip the symbol. Go ahead and put or. Subtract 4. Divide by 3. Okay, with this case, we graph both of these. So we're just going to put both of these on the number line together. We include everything. Your answer could be x is less than negative 2. Or your answer could be numbers above 1, not including 1. So therefore, they're open. So when you list your answer, we've got this one going to negative infinity. Remember, you want to list these from least to greatest. So that's going to be from negative infinity to negative 2. Or we use the union symbol, 1, and this one goes to positive infinity. Okay. Our other one that we're going to solve, if you want to pause the video and try it and come back and check your answer and follow me through the steps if you possibly missed it. Okay, so I'm going to subtract the 1. Divide by 2. So we get x is greater than 4. Or subtract 3. That'll give me an 8. Divide by negative 4. And I'm going to flip the symbol. Okay, now one way people mess up here is not putting the lowest one on the left. So we want to start here when we're thinking about graphing it. So I'm going to put a -2 here, and then I have a 4 here. Now remember with and, you're looking for what's in common. But with or, you just graph everything. So I'm going to start here with this one, and I'm going to have an open on -2 going to the right. Here, when I go to this one, that one would be an open on 4 going to the right. Since this one right here went through that circle, it is in this one, okay? So this number 4 is bigger than -2. So it is in one or the other. So your final answer is just going to be this ray, because we're putting everything together. So it only has to occur once. If it's an and, it would have had to have occurred both times. That's the overlap. So this answer is x is greater than -2. So we would put a -2 to positive infinity. If it was an and, then it would be at your 4, because that's what they would both have to have in common. So when you're and, it would have been the open 4 to positive infinity, because that would be in both, okay? But it would be an open still on 4, because it had to be in both, and it's not equal to 4 in this one if it was an and. Okay, now we're to the last part of the word problems. So suppose you rented a forklift to move a pallet with 70-pound blocks stacked on it. The forklift can carry a maximum, that would be an inequality, of 2,500 pounds. The pallet already weighs 50 pounds. So we have a pallet that's weighing 50 pounds. We have to count that weight into consideration with no blocks. How many blocks can be stacked on a pallet and lifted by the forklift? Okay, so X is going to be the number of blocks. So each block is 70 pounds. So we have 70 pounds per block. We already have a pallet, which is 50 pounds. And the maximum it can carry is 2,500. That means that's the maximum, that's your highest. So it has to be less than or equal to 2,500. So now we're ready to solve. We're going to subtract 50. That'll be 2,450. Divide by 70. So that would be 35 blocks or less, okay? So your answer would be somewhere between 0 and 35 blocks, because you wouldn't have negative blocks. So you could carry somewhere between 0 and 35. 0 works, 35 works, and anything in the middle. So when you're thinking about anything in the middle, you wouldn't go past 35 blocks. You could have like 1, 2, and so forth, all the way to 35. It would have to be a whole number, okay? Because the blocks are in holes. Okay, perimeter of a rectangular fence is to be at least 80. At least is another keyword for inequality. So if you want to make at least a C in a class, that would be greater than or equal. So it's got to be at least 80. No more than means not more than. That's an inequality. Less than or equal to 140. It tells us that the width is 12 feet. Okay. If you remember, when we're looking at perimeter, you have 2L plus 2W. So with our perimeter, we have 2L plus 2 times 12. So that's going to give us 2L plus 24. Okay, that's going to be in the middle. So that's going to be in the middle of our inequality. We want the largest number on the right and the smallest number on the left. So less than or equal. And then I have to turn this around. Notice if I read it backwards, 80 is less than. Now we're ready to solve for the length. So I'm going to subtract 24. So that's going to give us 56. And then 1/16. Okay, so now we need to divide by 2. So we're going to get 28 and 58. So what this tells us is the range for the length needs to be between 28 and 58 feet. So the length must be between 28 feet and 58 feet. Okay, Nancy sells handcrafted bracelets at a flea market for $7. So she has $7 that she's charging per bracelet. Okay, and notice that she wants to make a profit. So this is going to have to be greater than her expenses. So her monthly costs are $775. And she's also paying $225 per bracelet that she makes. So now we're ready to see how many she's going to have to sell to make a profit. So I'm going to subtract. That's going to be $475. Divide. Okay, so when you take that 775 and you divide by 475, you're going to see 163.15. But we want to make a profit, so we're going to have to round up. So it's going to mean she has to sell greater than 164 bracelets. And the last question deals with an average. So when you think about an average, that's where you're going to add up your data and divide by the number that you have, the number of scores here that we're talking about. So we want to find an average. So we have 3 college exams. So we're going to have an 85 plus an 89 plus a 90. So we're going to add those up. So it says, what score must they make on their next exam? Okay, so we don't know what that is. So in algebra, we let that become X because that's unknown. So that's the data we're going to have to add up. Well, the number of scores that we have here, counting the unknown, is going to be 4. Okay, At least is that key inequality word, greater than or equal to 90. Okay, so now we're going to add up the scores we do have. 85 plus 89 plus 90. That's going to give us 264. Now I'm going to get rid of dividing by 4, so I'm going to times by 4. So when I distribute to this part right here, those 4s are going to cancel. And then I'm going to do 4 times 90, which is going to be 360. And then I subtract 264. So she would have to make a 96 or above. So if the exam went up to 100, she would need to make somewhere in between 96 and 100. And if the professor gave extra credit, of course, she could make over and still get that. Okay. Hope you have a good day, and don't forget to upload your notes to D2L.